Hey guys, this is Jimmy, and I'll welcome you back to another installment in my Wrestling Reimagining series for WCW 1999. So in our last video, we tackled the April pay-per-view event Spring Stampede. So we are going to transition over into our annual May pay-per-view event, Slamboree. Now, this is the first WCW in many years to not feature the NWO in any capacity, now that the NWO has finally dissolved after 2.5 years. Around this time, WCW ended up rebranding their entire presentation with a brand new company logo, coupled along with a new arena set, especially for their flagship series Monday Nitro. And, WCW's just been going through a new phase as far as where they're headed as we gear into the new millennium. And alluding to a Ric Flair promo in the weeks before Spring Stampede, that this would be the end of an era, and that tagline would have determined the fate of WCW and NWO's existence. And because WCW ended up coming out on top, so now that the NWO is out of the way, so WCW is ushering in a brand new era without the presence of the NWO. And might as well have just been an appropriate time to overhaul WCW, and especially even during this time when they ended up rebranding like they did with the new logo and with the new arena sets and whatnot. So sort of like a smooth transition from the heyday of the NWO and into the post-NWO era, or the Millennium era, however you want to refer to WCW's last few years. But this is going to be the new presentation for the remaining half of 1999. So we're definitely selling this idea of this new direction that WCW's headed, and we definitely make that known, and the announcers will make it known as well, that this is a beginning of a new era in World Championship Wrestling. And you could just have Tony Schiavone just mention that as soon as the Monday Nitro after Spring Stampede starts. So something to kind of acknowledge. Before I get to my card for Slamboree 99, what you need to know is that there is actually one title change. So in a rematch from Spring Stampede, we have Chavo Guerrero Jr. defeating Billy Kidman to become the new Cruiserweight Champion. So Chavo winning his first WCW title. So a pretty big moment for him, especially in his career up to this point. And just to coincide with the heel turn as a result of what went down at Spring Stampede. So Chavo goes on to win the Cruiserweight title. Without further ado, we might as well just get started. So for my opening match at Slamboree, I have here is for the World Tag Team titles. So we have Horsemen members Dean Malenko and Chris Benoit set to defend their titles against the Windham brothers, comprised of Barry and Kendall Windham. Now, there isn't really much buildup here necessarily, but Benoit and Malenko had won the tag title belts from Juventud and Psychosis at Spring Stampede. So the Horsemen have been continuing to defend their belts on weekly TV. And while all that's going on, Barry and Kendall have been forging a unit, especially that they're blood brothers. So they would go on to have their string of consecutive wins. And they continue with that momentum headed into Slamboree to qualify for Benoit and Malenko for the tag team titles. Kind of a match based on technical wrestling, as opposed to what I've been doing with all these opening matches on pay-per-view. Is just always opening up with the Cruiserweight match. And while that's completely understandable, given the crowd, just giving them something to be really excited about, I want to try and do something a little bit different, and just to have two teams just kind of duking it out in a classic technical based wrestling of sorts, something that WCW has been most known for, and especially when it comes to their talent. So kind of like a tag team match where it starts off really slow, but then it picks up and picks up and picks up, and it starts becoming a lot more like action packed and very suspenseful in a way where you just never know who's gonna nail their signature moves, and just a lot of like twists and turns as far as like the kind of like technical wrestling that I'm approaching here. So Benoit and Malenko are going to retain those tag team title belts, and we have Chris Benoit as the legal person in the ring, and he's going to nail a diving headbutt from the turnbuckle onto Kendall Windham to get the cover and to secure the victory for him and Malenko to walk out of the match still your World Tag Team Champions. Now we go over into our next match, and this is going to be for the Television Championship. And I have Stevie Ray from Harlem Heat set to defend his belt against Ernest the Cat Miller. Now, Stevie Ray had been TV champion since March. He had won the belt from Scott Steiner on an episode of Nitro. So Stevie Ray's been holding that TV title belt ever since. And, he's been defending that belt on occasions on like episodes of Thunder and Saturday Night. So he's making those defenses very successful and retaining them. But now you also have another a challenger that's been a number one contender for the TV title. And the Cat has been one of the most key important superstars in that undercard division, having been spotlighted throughout WCW programming in late 1998 going to 1999. So if you recall from the last video, the Cat defeated Jerry Lynn at Spring Stampede. Also factoring in the TV wins that he's been racking up in the weeks following that event. So the Cat would be a number one contender. And, Stevie Ray, being one half of Harlem Heat's been TV champion for quite some time. So the TV title hadn't been defended so far since Super Brawl in my scenario. But after 2 pay-per-views, we finally get to see a TV title defense on pay-per-view. And, this is going to be kind of a match that might seem to be a step down from the opening contest, which is okay. It's not going to be a long match necessarily, given that Sonny has been managing the Cat for many months up in this point. So he's going to have a hand in doing his part to distract Stevie Ray while the Cat manages to gain advantage. And, Stevie Ray's just doing everything he can, and there are moments where he looks like he could have the match won, but a lot of the times either the Cat kicks out of his finishing move, like the slapjack that Stevie Ray was using, or Sonny is just up on the apron, just distracting the referee. So there's just a lot of shenanigans that ensues as the match is in progress. And so as Stevie Ray gets into Sonny Ono's face, so this allows the Cat to buy some time to regain his composure. He gets back up. Stevie Ray turns around and is met by a 540 tornado kick, causing Stevie Ray to get knocked out. And so the Cat goes for the cover. Referee turns around, goes for the 3, allowing for the Cat to successfully win the WCW Television Championship. So, like I said, just not a very long match necessarily. Might not seem like the sexiest match on the card that I have on here, but definitely does its job. The Cat's been kind of on a hot streak, and the Cat just constantly bragging about his martial arts prowess and how that translates into his run in professional wrestling. So the Cat would go on to win his first championship belt in WCW. Now we get to our third match, and this is actually going to be a cruiserweight match consisting of these 2 respective wrestlers. So we have Psychosis taking on Juventud Guerrera, 2 former members of the LWO. And I say former, as Ric Flair, the WCW president, would go on Nitro to formally announce that due to the controversy surrounding the scuffle between Psychosis and Juventud, combining with the fact that their original leader, Eddie Guerrero, has been out of action for quite some time. So due to a lack of leadership, Ric Flair formally addresses to the fans and the folks at home that the LWO has disbanded, and thus the LWO being no more. So now that the NWO is also gone, so to kind of coincide with that as well. So Juvi and Psychosis are also just going one-on-one, former tag team champions, but now they lost the belts. Neither men are willing to coexist, so this leads us into this one-on-one bout. Now, ideally, I would have Juventud as the babyface, but I've been kind of thinking about it, because we haven't really seen much of Psychosis as a babyface. He had been mostly a heel throughout his tenure in WCW, and there was like a point in time where I believe he had like Sonny as manager. I want to do something a bit experimental and see if we could have a face Psychosis taking on a heel Juventud. So yeah, just a one-on-one match, basically your typical cruiserweight match. And I want to say I would have, Juventud going over Psychosis here. Psychosis is going to put on a hell of a match, but even despite that, Juventud's going to go over. Let's say like the referee is blindsided, and so Psychosis tries to fight back, goes for his finishing move. I think he did like the guillotine leg drop from the top rope, and he goes for the cover, but the referee's like blindsided, like he's just like he'd been eye raked a couple minutes prior to that, so he's still recovering. So Psychosis goes to assure the referee and checking to see if he's okay. Then Juventud gets up, hits a low blow on Psychosis, and then hits the Juvi driver, and then the 450 splash to secure the victory. So Juventud goes over Psychosis, but even despite taking the loss, Psychosis looks strong in the loss. Hopefully a pretty good cruiserweight match. I can't imagine them having a terrible match, especially given their talent and their background, especially when it comes to Lucha Libre. I mean, these guys were the cornerstones of the original cruiserweight division. I want to cross my fingers and hoping that this match delivers, and just given these two wrestlers and their chemistry, I could definitely see it deliver. Fingers crossed. Now we segue into our fourth match, and this is actually another tag team match, but with the twist that it's Raven's Rules. So giving you a bit of a cue there. So Raven and Perry Saturn are set to take on the team of Bam Bam Bigelow and Chris Kanyon. This feud had been going on for about a month or so, and even around the time of early spring of '99, where Kanyon is taken off TV as a result of the attack sustained by Bam Bam Bigelow. So Raven's looking for another partner, so Perry Saturn comes along. So given Raven and Saturn's past history, they end up making amends, and so putting their differences aside, so they become a tag team. At Spring Stampede, if you recall, Raven and Bam Bam went one-on-one, and Bam Bam ended up going over Raven in the process. But the feud continues on in the weeks leading into this May pay-per-view. And initially, the announcers informed the fans that the Slamboree match would have been a handicap match with Raven Saturn and just Bam Bam Bigelow all alone. But on the go-home Nitro to Slamboree, we have Bam Bam and Saturn going one-on-one, and the match ends in disqualification when Bam Bam uses a weapon on the Saturn, so the referee calls for the bell. So Bam Bam continues to beat up Saturn some more. Raven comes out there looking to make the save, but even despite his efforts, I mean, the big man and Bam Bam just destroys Raven and Saturn. So it seems all hope was lost. And then Chris Kanyon comes out with the chair in hand. We haven't seen Kanyon in a month or so. So the announcers will acknowledge that. Canyon confronts Bam Bam looking as though he's going to hit him. But then out of nowhere, he ends up clubbing the chair on Raven and Saturn. So Bam Bam and Canyon have like this like evil smirk on each other's faces as a clear indicator that they're in cahoots. So therefore, Canyon makes that heel turn and forges an alliance with Bam Bam. It will eventually be announced that at Slamboree, instead of a handicap match, it becomes a tag team match, but with Raven's rules: no disqualifications, no countouts, false count anywhere. So this is where this match ends up coming to be. Bam Bam and Canyon are going to go over Raven and Saturn here. And you're going to expect a lot of like the typical hardcore wrestling with all the weapon usage and a lot of brawling at ringside and perhaps through the crowd if need be, while Raven and Bam Bam are continuing to duke it out at ringside. So Canyon is going to hit the flatliner on Perry Saturn on a stop sign, and he's going to go for the cover. The referee makes that 3 count for Canyon to win along with his new buddy Bam Bam Bigelow. And so there will definitely be more to come when it comes to the partnership with Canyon along with the Beast from the East. Now we get into another Cruiserweight match, but this time this is for the Cruiserweight Championship belt. So we have the new champion Chavo Guerrero Jr. set to take on Rey Mysterio Jr. So as I discussed earlier, Chavo had won the Cruiserweight title belt from Billy Kidman in a Spring Stampede rematch. So Chavo's been sporting this new attitude and, you know, being part of the Guerrero family heritage. So given everything that's been going on with Chavo for the past several months, like even with his rift with his uncle Eddie Guerrero, and combined with everything that's been going on with Pepe, and now he's lost a close mannequin friend like Pepe. So like Chavo's just been going off the deep end. Like he's just kind of feels like a man without a country. You know, Eddie's been out of action because of the car accident that ensued around New Year's Day going to 99. So ever since then, like these factors combined, like Chavo's just been stepping his game up and really looking to do everything he can to, you know, maintain the positive reputation of the Guerrero family. But even despite his good intentions, but his like I said, his attitude, his demeanor, like the way that he wrestles in the ring, I mean, he's just been like really determined, and that ends up eating him up inside. So it just, like his desperation, like doing everything he can to win, he ended up submitting that heel turn and in the process becoming the Cruiserweight champion. Then you have Rey Mysterio, who's been a cornerstone of that Cruiserweight division and having held that belt on multiple occasions. So he looks to discipline Chavo. Like, you've just been going too far with this new personality that you've been going through, or your new attitude. I mean, it's like, I just haven't been impressed by that. And, you know, Mysterio's just, you know, just kind of feels sorry for Chavo and just everything that he's been going through the past year. This ends up being a match set to take place at Slamboree, so the Cruiserweight title belt is up for grabs. And this is the kind of a match that would end up becoming a fixture by the time that both wrestlers went over to WWE. But, you know, Chavo, even in actuality, wasn't really doing much. He just kind of floundered in the undercard. And yeah, especially when it came to the Cruiserweight division, because like by this time, the Cruiserweight division had to take a backseat for WCW's new hardcore division. It got to a point where like the Cruiserweight division just kind of seemed like an afterthought compared to what it was like a few years before that. And I really want to try and keep the Cruiserweight division going as we kind of usher in like a new wave. And Chavo Guerrero being that particular wrestler to kind of usher into that next chapter for that to work. So Chavo Guerrero is going to go over Rey Mysterio here, and Chavo's going to nail that tornado DDT on Mysterio, gets the 3 count for him to retain the title. So to just kind of really cement Chavo Guerrero as one of the key figures in the restructuring of the Cruiserweight division. And I definitely feel that, for whatever reason, WCW just didn't have as much faith in the division by the time 99 rolled around. And, if you watch any of the shows from the summer of 99, I mean, it's astounding just to see how far the Cruiserweight division has fallen. Now we're going over into our next match. So we have Best Friends, Bitter Enemies, 2 now former members of the NWO, with Scott Steiner taking on Buff Bagwell. Now at Spring Stampede, Booker and Scott Steiner went at it for the US title. There was some miscommunication along the way between Steiner and Bagwell. While the referee was out, Bagwell tried to grab a chair while Steiner holds Booker by the arms. So Bagwell looked to hit Booker with the chair, but then Booker ducks out of it, accidentally hitting Scott Steiner in the process. So that played a key factor as far as the dissension between 2 members of the New World Order. So Steiner isn't proud of what happened at Spring Stampede, that he came close, but things just kind of went south, and Steiner would like to blame Bagwell for being the reason why he didn't win the US title. So he attacks Buff Bagwell, taking his frustrations out on him, and even locking in the Steiner recliner. So cementing Buff Bagwell as the babyface. This eventually segs way into this one-on-one match now that the NWO is gone. And so that coincides with the friction between Steiner and Bagwell. And so this was a match that they did at the actual Slamboree show. I wouldn't necessarily have any title belts being involved in any way, but this just could be like a sort of like an upper mid-card match, just a bad blood between 2 former friends. So the finish is somewhat the same. We could have Rick Steiner, Scott's brother, that we haven't seen in many months, at least in this scenario. So Rick Steiner comes out, and we haven't seen him since his injury that he sustained, where he had to vacate the tag team title belts towards the end of 98. So aside from a couple like house show appearances, so the announcers make it known that Rick Steiner makes his return to WCW programming. And so he comes out, he confronts his brother, Scott, and given their past history from the previous year, and so Rick and Scott kind of bicker at each other for a bit, just when Rick Steiner looks to help Bagwell, but instead he attacks Bagwell and playing a part in doing his part to cost Bagwell the match. And Steiner, Scott Steiner specifically, goes on to take the advantage from there and lock in the Steiner recliner. There would be a typical ref bump along the way, and that would explain Rick Steiner coming out there. So Scott and Rick end up patching things up, and they end up reuniting as heels. Now we go into our triple header, and the first out of the 3 matches here is Scott Norton taking on the Macho Man Randy Savage. So the Macho Man makes his televised return in the weeks leading to the Spring Stampede. He ends up officiating that end of an era 10-man tag team match. The Macho Man would go on to have his in-ring pay-per-view return as far as wrestling is concerned. This kind of stems from a match where Norton defeats Conan, the Nitro, after Spring Stampede. So after Norton defeats Conan, post-match he ends up continuing to lay an assault on Conan until Macho Man comes out there to make the save. As you all know, the Macho Man and Conan going back to their Wolfpack days, so they were kind of comrades taking on NWO Hollywood. So to kind of bring up that sort of continuity, Savage and Konnan on good terms. So, Savage is doing his part to kind of avenge Konnan by taking out Scott Norton. So the Macho Man Randy Savage will go over Scott Norton. And not a very long match necessarily, but Norton still puts up a hell of a fight. And he's going to nail the flying elbow drop that he normally does from the top rope for him to get the cover and the win. So the Macho Man gets his first victory back after injury. So, basically you want to bring him back hot. So now we get to Sting versus Kevin Nash. Basically Sting, also like Randy Savage, coming back after taking time off. So Sting made his return on the March 29th edition of Nitro. And so he participates in that 10-man tag match to determine the fate of the WCW and the NWO's existence. So as we all know, WCW ended up triumphing over the New World Order. So therefore, the NWO dissolves. Sting and Kevin Nash, this basically continues from that tag team match that they were involved on opposing sides. So Sting's back with the black and white face paint, not the red and black. Basically we kind of bring up their past history, especially when it came to their alliance in the Wolfpack. And basically Sting's going to come up with a promo, and he talks about all the stuff that's happened while he was away. So while he was recovering from an injury, the NWO Wolfpack and the Hollywood factions reunited to become one gigantic family once more. And, Sting's going to admit that he had been gullible for even trusting Nash, even having fought side by side with them this past year. Even when the NWO first started, Sting was kind of a mystery because you couldn't even tell whether he was siding with the WCW or the NWO guys. There's this sort of mystique behind the original Crow character when it came to Sting's transformation from the Surfer Sting into the black and white Sting that we all know and love. But then by the time 98 rolled around, there was dissension between Hogan and Nash. So the two wrestlers eventually split up. So Nash had his Wolfpack, Hogan had his Hollywood. Sting joins NWO Wolfpack, thinking that Nash has changed his ways, that he realizes that maybe Nash isn't such a bad guy after all. And even though Sting and Nash had their differences in the past, but they both had something in common, and that's their hatred towards Hogan. Looking back on it, it's Sting's just wishing that he could take it all back by refusing to succumb to the NWO's latest propaganda. And Kevin Nash also shares his side of the story, claiming that the reason that he brought Sting in the Wolfpack was not only based on their strained relationship with Hulk Hogan, but also realizing that by recruiting Sting, that would help boost the NWO's reputation, as well as persuading more WCW wrestlers to join the NWO. Kevin Nash was not willing to give up on the NWO moniker, and was looking to kind of use that as a way to continue to market the NWO without Hogan's presence, especially, given that Nash is kind of doing his own thing and Hogan's doing his. Eventually, we get this one-on-one match between two former Wolfpack members, and I would have Sting go over Kevin Nash here. The finish of the match would have Kevin Nash resorting to using the Snake Eyes, which ironically was Nash's old finisher when he was Vinny Vegas. So Nash tries to go for a jackknife powerbomb. Sting kicks out of it. Nash is in shock, and he's he's trying to insist the referee to count faster. So then Nash tries to pull off one desperation move, and that happens to be his old finishing move from his original WCW run. So Nash scoops Sting up, has him up on his shoulders, goes for Snake Eyes. Sting slips out of it, hits the Scorpion Death Drop, gets the cover for Sting to secure a victory and to go over Kevin Nash in the process. So Sting, much like the Macho Man, ends up getting his first pay-per-view victory back. And unless we want to count his victory from Spring Stampede when he was in that 10-man tag. But as far as like a one-on-one match on pay-per-view is concerned, so Sting does get his first victory in a one-on-one match since the past year or so. Now in my main event is going to be for the World Heavyweight Championship. So I have Goldberg going in as the champion, set to take on Diamond Dallas Page, a return match from Halloween Havoc 1998. So Goldberg had been holding that belt for 2 months up in this point. Given Goldberg's biggest accomplishment in playing a part in taking down the NWO for good, Goldberg's up for a challenge, and he's issuing anyone to step their game up, anyone that is willing to take him on, especially now that he's world champion. So he's like looking to defend the title belt against all comers. The WCW locker room are also kind of fighting over exactly who should be the number one contender. So there's this sort of like team meeting that ensues backstage, and Ric Flair, being the WCW president, goes to announce that that there will be a battle royal match where the winner would earn a title shot against the reigning champion Goldberg at the upcoming Slamboree pay-per-view. Eventually on Nitro, we get the battle royal, and Diamond Dallas Page wins the battle royal by eliminating both Sting and Kevin Nash simultaneously while they're teetering over towards the ropes. DDP becomes the number one contender. You know, we also have DDP and Goldberg also bring up their history, because like the last time they fought, like Goldberg ended up managing to put one over DDP, even despite a moment where it looked like Page was going to beat Goldberg and ending his undefeated streak at the time. But that was not to be. You know, even for the past several months, it's also kind of showing a bit of a change in his character. And his alliance with Bam Bam has influenced his judgment when it comes to the way that he is performing in the ring. Because, like, DDP is just wrestling very aggressively. Just a series of squash matches where he's winning with the Diamond Cutter in less than a minute and setting records that not many wrestlers in WCW are able to accomplish. And, even Goldberg had his kind of thing where he would destroy his opponents in less than 3 or 5 minutes. And DDP kind of does his own version of that, but instead he's nailing Diamond Cutters and winning matches under a minute. So kind of his own version of the Goldberg undefeated streak. DDP goes on for the record that this time things are going to be different. Like, even despite the fact that I came up short at Halloween Havoc for that world championship, you know what? Things have been different. I'm Diamond Dallas Page. I got my sidekick Bam Bam training me for the past several months and working in the gym and the weight rooms, just really sharing each other's advices. So we kind of emphasize on the development of Diamond Dallas Page and where he was back in October, and then we segue into how much progress DDP has been making going into the spring or summer of '99. So this all kind of boils ahead here in the main event at Slamboree, even in the moments prior to the match taking place. So Ric Flair also announces that Bam Bam Bigelow would be barred from ringside. So because of the alliance between Bam Bam and DDP, he wants to assure that Goldberg and DDP, as far as the match is concerned, be the kind of match that has a clean finish, no interferences or any shenanigans whatsoever. We have our main event, and it's just very hard fought. DDP and Goldberg definitely had some really great chemistry. I'm really looking to capitalize on the success that they had from their initial encounter, and looking to kind of hope that lightning strikes twice. DDP and Goldberg are just going to really go balls to the walls and really doing their part to keep the fans glued to their face, or even if they're at home, glued to the screen. So there's just going to be a lot of twists and turns and moments where they're going for signature moves and they just keep kicking out of them. There would be a bit of a callback from their Halloween Havoc match where Goldberg sets up for the jackhammer, DDP reverses, goes for a diamond cutter, but instead Goldberg shoves DDP out of the way. DDP bounces back. Goldberg goes for like a swinging choke slam or like a sidewalk slam of sorts, and then like DDP finds a way to reverse it. He hits the diamond cutter, and he goes for the cover to get that 3 count for him to become the new world heavyweight champion. So yeah, so DDP winning the world title for the first time in his career. I mean, he had started wrestling in his mid-30s, and he had his fair share of critics claiming that it's too late in his career, that he shouldn't be wrestling at that age, but DDP proved those critics wrong. So then he's holding the world heavyweight title for the first time in his career, and DDP and Goldberg end up shaking hands. So everything just seems to be running pretty smooth. There doesn't seem to be any hostility per se. During the post-match, we see Bam Bam Bigelow and Chris Kanyon accompanying each other as they walk down the aisle, and no one knows exactly why they're there. So Goldberg and DDP turn their attention towards the two, and and Bam Bam Kanyon have this kind of facial expression where it looks like they're willing to take Goldberg and DDP on. And just while all that's going on, a shocking turn of events occur when DDP clubs Goldberg by the back with the big gold belt. So this leads us into a 1-on-3 beatdown situation. Page goes for that figure 4 leg lock on the ring post, rupturing Goldberg's knee as a way to write him off. And in reality, Goldberg was promoting the Universal Soldier sequel that was just getting to come out during this time. So he had to take time off. I originally wanted Goldberg to stick around, but knowing those circumstances, so I just had to figure out a way to kind of work around that situation. And even though it was as gutting for me to end Goldberg's title reign short, but this also kind of leads us into, like I was discussing in the very beginning of the video, about how this is going to be a new chapter or a new era in World Championship Wrestling. So now the NWO is gone, but there's also a new faction that's also being formed, but they're not going to be the kind of faction that's going to destroy an organization. Basically, DDP, along with Bam Bam and Kanyon, continue to assault Goldberg, and like I was discussing with DDP locking in that figure 4 on Goldberg, and the show ends with the 3 wrestlers standing tall. So I'm doing kind of like my own version or my own take on the Jersey Triad. That's really my card for Slamboree 99. The reason why I had Ric Flair ban Bam Bam Bigelow for ringside, based on Bam Bam's attitudes, just to kind of make sure that the interferences in WCW were just very prevalent and very tiresome after a while, and with all the NWO shenanigans. So just a breath of fresh air, just not have any interferences during the middle of the match. So but this was kind of like my way of kind of working out that situation. So yeah, that's pretty much my card for Slamboree 99. Thank you all guys for watching, and until next time, this is Jimmy signing out.